A few weeks ago, we asked you what are some of the biggest questions you have about Canada. So today, we put together a list of most commonly asked questions from you. Everything from Canadian pension to good Canadian whiskey to whether Canada is still worth moving to.
We will answer all today, so buckle up. We will leave timestamps below so you can move to questions that interest you the most. Let's go!
A question from Ebragimovic. I'm considering to move to Canada next year, but concerned about the job market. And is it actually worthy with all the negative promotions I'm seeing online from both immigrants and Canadians? What do you think? I think people in general love to hate on Canada. And internet in general also loves negativity. The job market is also really strong in Canada, provided you have demand for your profession and you understand the specifics of the job market to land a job soon after your arrival. If you have that, you will be set in Canada. And aside from that, it's really difficult to answer the question if Canada is worth it. Compared to what, right? We made a few videos on this topic, so make sure to check it out. If you ask me, I could not imagine my life anywhere rather than in Canada.
I'm happy here, and for me it was worth moving here. And I'm sad that YouTube algorithm pushes negative content to make people click on such videos and build an impression like everything is bad in Canada. Next question. Is moving to Canada in early mid-30s, alone, no tag-along family members, and start all over with student visa still worth it? I know I made my decision and plans, but my family and friends keep asking me this question and I don't know how to answer it. Well, this is a very personal question. I would say it depends on your personality. Do you make friends easily? Are you excited about studying the program you applied to? Does your financial situation allow you to study and live comfortably in Canada? If the answer to all of those is yes, it's worth it. Life only starts at 30. In Canada, people change professions and pivot their lives and move to different cities at any age, and it's normal. Just make sure you have your immigration plan straight, because if your goal is to get PR in Canada, you need to build a strategy how to do that given your age.
I would also add that your friends and family will always have an opinion about your life. Many will be skeptical, and what really helped me is just to distance myself from all the worries and concerns that all the people around me have. To be honest with myself and with my goals too. In the end of the day, you don't need to answer to anybody else but yourself. And the biggest question to answer is it really worth it for you and only you? Okay, next, Vitalik. Hi, I'm considering to move to Canada next year, but are really concerned about the homelessness and drug use in Canada. Homelessness and drugs. Yes, it's a problem, but there are ways to avoid it. Are you concerned because you're afraid of crime, or that you or your family member will become one and have no way out? If you're worried about crime, generally, drug and homeless populations are concentrated in specific neighborhoods, so just to make sure to stay away from them. Drug addiction is usually associated with homelessness, and sometimes impacts teenagers in a similar way like anywhere in the world. If you're worried that you or your family members might be influenced, it's important to talk about it and to educate each other so you all know about ramifications.
It's important to know that there are numerous programs and associations to help homeless and drug addicts in Canada, so there is always a way out.
Another question from the same person, Vitalik. Hi. How do you see the healthcare system in the future, as according to different videos on YouTube, it is having a significant shortage of people? Do you see the government focuses on it and on improving it?
Healthcare system. Okay, so in short, the system is optimized for creating life and treating life-threatening conditions. If you have a threat to your life, you will receive help and you will receive it fast. Doctors also typically rely on how well you communicate what bothers you and what you need from them. And triage of patients always depends on the severity of their condition. The wait times and quality of doctors varies vastly depending on where you are. I had both spectrums of experience, good and bad.
For instance, I had a weird tension in my neck and felt like it was making breathing uncomfortable once. So I called a doctor and they set up an appointment and all the necessary tests immediately within the first 24 hours. I also had to wait for 6 months to get a gastroscopy, and to soothe the symptoms I had to take medications for those 6 months. Not ideal, but it wasn't life-threatening either, since medications could control the condition. And the same goes for wait times. I once fractured a wrist and it was a Saturday night around 11 p.m. and the hospital was literally empty, and I walked in and immediately received help. I also know another friend who fractured her wrist and had to spend an entire night at the hospital waiting to get x-rays and a cast. You never know which one you'll get.
Government is doing many things to improve the situation, and immigration is one, privatization of healthcare is another, and there are a lot of conversations and controversy about it, but personally we think it'll be a good thing in the long term. Overall, there definitely is a government focus on healthcare improvements. Each province is thinking about their own ways. However, the whole situation with pandemic really hurt the system, and it will take some time to recover and only then to improve. Next question is from Rami. Hi, Anna and Anastasia. Hi.
Hi.
I wanted to know, how is the situation in Canada lately regarding housing and jobs? We hear a lot that draws aren't as fast as before because of the housing problems in Canada, and that a lot of new immigrants can't find places to live nor jobs to work.
Well, there's definitely some tension between housing and jobs in Canada.
Let's start with housing crisis. You can always find housing in Canada. The only question is how much you're willing to pay and where you want to live. If your budget is $1,500 and you want to live in Toronto, you might struggle and you'll be able to afford a room, well, maybe a basement. And if your budget is $3,000, you can easily find an apartment in Toronto. And if you're not coming to Toronto, there are many affordable cities like Edmonton, Saskatoon, Regina, Quebec City, and others.
We've recently made a video about that for what you can rent for $1,000 in different cities in Canada, so make sure to check it out if you're curious.
Now let's talk about lack of jobs, and I think that could not be farther from the truth in our perspective. Some will probably disagree, but the truth is there are over 800,000 positions open right now in Canada, and depending on what your profession is, it may or may not be easy to get a job with no Canadian experience.
I have an example to share, and I love this example. So I have an uncle who's moved to Canada earlier this year on the CUAT visa, which is a Ukrainian work permit. He lived in Poland for the last couple of years working in an automotive factory assembly. So he moved to Montreal with zero French, barely some English, and he took a French course for the first 3 months just to pick up the language. And guess what? He found a job at the Ford assembly almost right after finishing his French course. Even more to that, he got 2 offers from 2 different car manufacturers within a short period of time, and he actually had the luxury of choosing which job had better pay and conditions. Sure, working at a factory assembly is not a sexy job for some, but for some, it's an incredible opportunity that they're gonna love. My uncle absolutely loves it, and it pays the bills well, and he is really happy that he's made the move to Canada. So next question comes from Okay, we're not gonna say that. Next question from Mr. G. Does Canada offer sponsorship for heavy goods vehicle drivers? And if so, what does the application process look like? Well, to begin, there's no official government sponsorship program that we know of.
No, but some employers may decide to offer visa sponsorship individually. We recommend following the application process on the job posting. Usually, just start with applying for the job and follow the instructions from the employer, and while you wait, learn about the LMIA process on the official Canadian website. We will leave the link below.
So one thing to keep in mind is just stay alert and keep an eye out on scams and fraud. There's lots of that happening right now on job postings targeting temporary foreign workers. Employers can never ask you to transfer them money or pay for your recruitment process. Never. One thing that you will have to do is you'll have to pay a visa processing fee, and that payment should be made directly through your visa application portal on canada.ca, not through the employer. Watch out for that.
Next question. Hi Anna. Hi. What do you think? Is Canada worthy after citizenship? Well, for me, being from Russia, having a Canadian passport is a huge advantage. I can now travel visa-free to so many countries, which was not possible before that, because Russians, unfortunately, aren't welcome in many parts of the world, and I had to allocate time, money, do a lot of paperwork to get different visas. And having the social protection of Canadian citizen is absolutely worth it for me. Being able to vote and have the voice in Canadian Canadian society, it's worth it, and my children will be Canadian citizens too. Personally, for me, it was a big effort to move to Canada. I worked hard for more than 5 years. I saved every single penny and went through a lot of stress, paperwork, language tests, and just to be able to move to Canada. And looking back, it's all worth it. I would do it again. And the way I feel here in this society, free, secure, and valued, it's miles better than the society of my home country. And just this feeling alone, it's worth it.
Next question is from Grant. Is it possible to immigrate to Canada in your late 30s and not in a big career? Okay, so first, the older you get, the more points you lose. So the sooner you move to Canada, the better, for sure. Having said that, late 30s is still possible, provided you can gain enough points, but you're cutting it close. So now talking about your not a big career, it really depends on what that means.
We recommend always to check out Canada.ca website and to see if your profession is in high demand in various provinces. Spend an hour browsing through job postings on job boards in Canada in your field and get a sense of requirements and whether there's plenty of postings around the country and in each province.
You can also go on Canada.ca website and see how many points you can get for express entry or any other federal program. This will really help you evaluate your chances compared to the latest draws, and it's also available on the website, so you'll see and be able to assess your chances adequately.
Lastly, sometimes it's more about how badly you want to leave your home country and have a different life. With that, everything is possible. If you really want something, you will find the way. If deep down you hesitate and you don't want something, you will find excuses not to do it, like your age.
Next one.
How can I immigrate to Canada when I'm a fresh graduate of structural engineering without any experience at all? The easiest way would probably be enrolling in a master's degree and coming here on a student visa, only if you can afford that, of course. Another option is to gain experience in your home country, improve your language, and then go through Express Entry Federal Skilled Worker Program. And of course, there are other options like through work permit if you find an employer, or partner sponsorship if you find love, or refugee program if, God forbid, something is threatening your life in your home country. And there are many ways, and all of them are available for free on Canada.ca website, and there are no secrets at all.
And if you really don't know where to start and feeling anxious, you can get some help from a licensed immigration lawyer professional. They'll help you get answers quickly and easily. They'll assess your situation and give you some recommendations and examples. Keep in mind that it is a costly service. We will leave some links in the description box below for some of the recommendations on immigration services if you do decide to do that. However, we believe that you can do everything by yourself. You don't need help of an immigration lawyer.
Yeah, and even if you go to see an immigration lawyer, to consult with an immigration lawyer, you do need to have at least some understanding, some gist of the process. So it's still good to go through Canada.ca website before you go to have that conversation with the lawyer.
It will also help you get an idea whether or not what the immigration lawyer is saying actually makes sense and is true.
Always choose a licensed immigration lawyer.
Licensed indeed. How do you know that someone's a licensed immigration lawyer?
We will leave a link below from Canada.ca website to the list of licensed immigration lawyers.
Canada.ca is the golden website for any information you need in regards to the immigration process.
And literally all information is available there. All you need is some patience and time to go through it.
Next question from Amar. What are the chances of getting immigration to Canada when I have a sibling well settled there and I also have 1 year of teaching experience? Gonna take IELTS within 60 days too. Good luck with that. That's first and foremost. Well, Amar, it's a bit hard to evaluate your chances based on just this information alone because we don't know anything else about you, but what we can say is that having a sibling significantly increases your overall speed and quality of assimilation, since you'll have someone to help you out when you come here and you need some help. As for chances related to your professional profile, please visit Canada.ca website. As we mentioned, it costs nothing for you to calculate your chances. It just takes a couple of minutes of your time, and talk to your sibling if you need any help in understanding how the different systems work.
All right, moving on. Please, I want to learn about the visas available and the ones that lead to permanent residence. Guys, you'll be surprised, but I'll tell you where you can find all the information. There is a website called Canada.ca. It's an official Government of Canada website. There is a tab, Immigration and Citizenship, and there you can learn all about federal and provincial programs. It's all there, including all documents required and step-by-step instructions for each type of visa. Alternatively, you can check out supervisas.com, We will leave the link to them below, and you can use their free calculator to see which immigration program you might be eligible for.
Next question is from Kazantsev, 88. Did you live in Toronto for a long time? Well, both of us lived in Toronto for 3 years.
I moved here in February 2019, but I left shortly because I found work in another city and came back to Toronto in January 2020.
And I moved to Toronto in September 2019 for a job offer.
We lived in 3 different apartments in different neighborhoods in downtown area of Toronto, and we traveled to Toronto maybe once or twice a week.
Okay, so a couple or more questions were filled out anonymously through the form that we provided.
This question is about saying goodbye to your parents who stay in your home country. The whole family back in Russia is against that. They are influenced by propaganda. So the person is asking an ethical question. Isn't this person abandoning their parents? And is it okay to do so? Because parents are getting older and this factor holds them back in their home country.
This is a difficult question, and every single one of us faces this when we decide to move to Canada. What we can say is that it's your life and you do what's best for you and for the family that you have created. When my parents moved to Canada, my grandparents were sad, and they're still sad that we're so far away and we don't see each other that often, but we still do our best to stay connected and visit them from time to time. But at the same time, they're also super happy for us that we live in a better society, that we're more stable, more safe, more successful. They now live through the stories and experiences that we're living through, and that's what makes them happy. A question that I would be really interested to ask myself if I were you is, will your parents be happy knowing that they're holding you back from having a happy life that you've dreamed of, if it means that you're going to move to Canada or somewhere far away?
I also have 2 examples to share. We have a friend who lives here in Canada, and her parents are brainwashed by Russian propaganda and they live in Moscow. And whenever they have a phone call, they always have quarrels and they dispute about political situations and all that. So it's hard, but she's happy here and she thinks that her parents are independent and it's their choice, and she's independent and it's her choice, even taking into consideration that her parents are alone there. If they change their mind, they can always come visit her here, but it's their choice. I also have another example of my friend who moved to Georgia since the war started. It was difficult for her to make this decision because she has a mom who stayed back in Russia who is quite ill and alone. But what's happening now is she's talking to her mom back at home, and her mom sees her daughter being happy in another country, hearing stories about what's happening in another country, and it helps her expand her outlook. Her mom is not as worried as she used to be because she sees that her daughter is thriving in another country, and her mom is now considering to come visit her. So it's all individual. You never know. Your parents might change their mind once you start talking from them across the pond, or you will realize that it's their choice, they're independent, they can always change their opinion and come visit you. If not, well, that's how life is, as long as you're happy, because this is your life and you only have a limited amount of years for this life, so don't waste it. Your last video was about why not to move to Canada, and it highlighted the disadvantages for workers. Can you do one for students and youths who are still uncertain what they want in life and think schooling in Canada will help set their path? Sure. It's a great topic. We usually don't do many videos for students, but we can make this one, so stay tuned.
If you wanna check out some videos about students, there's a few really cool YouTubers who focus on international students and studying in Canada as well. We'll leave the link to them below as well, so you can check them out. Another anonymous person wants to know how bad the situation in Canada is now. They're thinking of applying for the express entry, but super scared for the situation. They're also not coming alone and have a son and a partner they're coming with. Well, this is one of the most typical situations. And first of all, if you apply for express entry, that's free of charge. You can do that and not lose anything. So why not just give it a try and see what you get? Whether you're invited from a pool of candidates during the next draw, that's another story. Something to think about later. If you're confident about your CRS score, congratulations. The bar is set very high these days, so if you're invited, it's actually a big deal. And you would need to collect all the paperwork and pay for your application fee, only if you're invited. The rest depends really on your life situation.
Canada is not as bad as many people paint it. Yes, cost of living is high, but it's about the same level as you'd expect from any other developed country in the world after the pandemic. Just make sure to do your research on the job market in Canada and make sure that your profession is in real demand before moving here.
Real demand.
Because many newcomers stumble on the job search part and get discouraged and really disappointed. So you need to ask yourself, why Canada? Why not any other English-speaking country, for example? Canada has some specifics that you better be prepared for. That's why it's important to do your research before you come here. For example, climate, healthcare, licensing for a wide range of professions, and importance of networking and so on. Those are very specific to Canada.
Also, talk to your partner and son. What do they think? What would their life be like in Canada? You're moving as a family, so it's important you're making this decision as a family as well. What's your partner's job prospects like? Keep in mind that immigration is something that can either break relationship or make them stronger than ever. I've lived through that where my parents' relationship wasn't as strong and they actually separated just a few years after moving to Canada. Make sure that doesn't happen to you and make sure your family is fully into the moving to Canada journey. We've also seen cases of friends where one of the partners is successful and happy in Canada but the other spouse isn't. So sometimes it may cause either a separation or they end up moving back to their country, making one of them unhappy.
So it would be nice to talk through those scenarios as well. Alright, where I can drink and smoke in Canada. Also, what kind of things I should avoid so that not to end up in court or jail in Canada. Well, generally you're not allowed to drink alcohol in public in Canada. You're allowed to drink only at home, at a bar or at a restaurant. Montreal has a very funky law where you can drink alcohol at a picnic at the park, provided you have food with you. They're doing it the French way, but this year the authorities started implementing similar rules in Toronto in parks. As for smoking, smoking is allowed provided that you are 18 years old and you cannot smoke indoors, and many buildings have a policy prohibiting smoking within 8 meters from the entrance of the building. Smoking green substance in Canada is legal on federal level. However, just like drinking alcohol, it's absolutely not allowed when driving.
As for what to avoid getting in jail, well, read the laws of the country and the province you're moving to. Ignorance of the law is no excuse. You can't defend your actions by arguing you didn't know that something was illegal, even if you honestly didn't realize that you were breaking the law. So we highly recommend just getting to know the laws of the country and the place you're moving into. And it actually stands true even for countries you're traveling to as well. Remote work for US companies inside Canada. Yes, you can totally work remotely for American companies. Depending on whether or not they have a satellite office in Canada, you might have to be self-employed or contractor. And if that's the case, then you'll be responsible for filing and paying your own income tax. Or if they have a satellite office, you'll be a payrolled employee and your taxes will be deducted automatically.
Moving on. Can you recommend popular Canadian craft beers or whiskey brands? Oh, that one is for you.
Oh yeah, I can speak on Canadian whiskey for sure. So Canadian whiskey is known as rye whiskey. Even though it's mostly made out of corn, it does have some rye in it, so for some reason they just call it rye whiskey. Some known Canadian brands are Crown Royal, Canadian Club, and 40 Creek. Canadian Club is probably the most known thanks to the popular TV show Mad Men. What makes it different from Scotch or bourbon is that it's generally a little bit spicier, bolder, and has a more edgy taste, I guess. Personally, I only drink Canadian whiskey in cocktails, but I prefer bourbon for cocktails and Scotch neat. And as for craft beers, there's a lot of breweries and microbreweries all around Canada, so depending on where you live, you can just Google and check out some microbreweries and check out their local beers. There's definitely lots of really good beers and a lot of like really small breweries and even like private brewers where you can buy beer.
Yeah, it's just unfortunately we don't drink beer too often, so there's nothing we can personally recommend. How much is going to be my Canada pension? Well, that depends on several factors. In short, first of all, it depends on how long you've worked in Canada. And secondly, what your annual salary has been. If you are employed and on a payroll, employees and employers contribute to your pension plan, which represents about 18.4% of your annual income. Based on some public data, an average pension payment has been somewhere between $600 to $1,000 a month in Canada. But don't forget, there is also RRSP, a registered retirement savings plan, which is a great tool to save up for pension and pay less tax. We made a video where we talked about RSP in detail, and you can watch it up here, or you will find the link in the description box below.
Another thing worth mentioning is that some employers, especially large corporations, have an RRSP matching program. So if you put some money into an RRSP, your employer will put the same exact amount of money, up to a certain percentage of your annual salary. And that's a really good way to save for your retirement really quickly and get some free money from your employer.
Yeah.
Next one. From the anonymous person. Hello, thank you for the great idea. You're very welcome, we hope you like it. My current questions are about jobs one can find in fast food chains, cafes. First, how quickly do they generally respond after applying? Second, how many hours per week one can work at those? And third, is it easy to quit once we find a job in our field of interest? So that's a good one. Well, first, getting a job at a cafe is easier than ever. You just want to make sure that you have some customer-facing experience. If you have an office job experience on your resume and you apply to work at a cafe, you might face some challenges. But if it's your first job in Canada, you'll have no problem, especially if you're a student. It typically depends on the cafe and chain on how long the hiring process takes. It can take anywhere between just a couple of weeks or maybe even a week, up to a few months, depending on the specifics. It's best that you actually simply walk into a cafe, ask for a manager, and personally hand them your resume or your application, and you might end up having an interview right on the spot.
As for the work hours, it all depends. You can expect to work anywhere from 10 to 20 hours per week, up to 40 hours per week, or even more. And yes, you can quit at any time, especially during probationary period, but it is common courtesy to offer 2 weeks notice in advance when you want to quit, to give your employer time to find a replacement. Plus, you will probably want referrals, so just in case, you better leave on good terms.
Never burn any bridges in Canada. Is it a good idea to move to Canada from the US and then start the hunt for a job? I'm an experienced IT professional on H-1B visa and have an approved open work permit for Canada. Congratulations! And most recruiters that I talk to encourage me to move first and then talk to them once I'm physically in Canada. Okay, that's a good one. So it's always a good idea to start looking before relocation. Your ideal situation is coming to Canada when you have your final interview, or ideally after you've accepted a job offer. Employers and recruiters can be tricky about relocation. Relocation plans may change for people, so it's a risk for them to give you an offer before they know for sure that you're relocating. It's also a stressful and a messy process, so employers prefer you get over your move before you start working, so that doesn't affect your focus or your performance and whatnot, and hence the recommendation for recruiters to move and then talk to them. Because they're also kind of protecting their butts, because they will be recommending you for the role, and if something happens, it's gonna look bad on them.
Yeah, but it's always nice to test the waters and start networking and looking for jobs before you come to Canada, because remember, since you apply to the moment you start getting responses, it might take anywhere from 1 to 3 months.
Next one. Will previous work experience from our home country be considered while getting that first job in Canada? $1 million question. Is Canadian experience mandatory to get a job in development HR job profile? Second question, is there a possibility to apply for remote jobs in the US with a Canadian PR? And third, do you see things improving for Canada in 2025-26? Okay.
Let's start with the first one, about the previous work experience. And here is an unpopular opinion. When they reject you because you don't have a Canadian experience, is the Canadian polite way to say, I don't think you will fit in our culture and you haven't convinced me that you have experience that we need. Having said that, yes, your experience will be considered when getting your first job in Canada. Moreover, the more your experience matches the profile of the person that they're looking for, the better your chances are to get the job. Depending on which country you're coming from, maybe some HR specifics will be different. So make sure to do your research and research the job market and have a good understanding of how HR role in your country compares to Canada. Now, speaking of HR, it is highly compliance and people-oriented role, so the employer's expectations will be high, and having HR certification will be a huge asset here.
And as usual, don't forget to network with people working in your field. They can provide great advice and insight, or even give you a reference if you're lucky. Your second question was about the possibility of remote jobs in the US with a Canadian PR. Well, yes, you can apply to remote US jobs, but you can only be a contractor or self-employed, with some minor exceptions, as we mentioned before, if a company has a satellite office in Canada. Read the job postings. Some companies are adamant that candidates are either residents or citizens in the US as well. And then you had your last question of, do we see things improving in Canada in 2025? Well, nobody has cancelled the recession yet, not just in Canada, but in the entire world. The next few years might indeed be rocky, but we're no economists, so we can't tell for sure. Personally, I think Canada will be less affected than the US or some European counterparts, just based on how the economy has done historically, and we don't see things changing anytime soon. And honestly, I feel like if we continue doing the immigration with the same rate like we do today, it will force Canada and it will force the economy to do better. That's my personal non-economist opinion.
On this note, moving on.
Immigrating to Canada at 40. How to succeed and opportunities and risks.
Okay, well, if your goal is to get permanent residence in Canada, it's difficult, and you need to have a clear path in mind how to collect enough CRS points to go through express entry, and I highly recommend you to sit down and talk to a licensed immigration lawyer or consultant and come up with various possible scenarios. One of those scenarios could be through work permit or education, or even marriage and sponsor visa. So to sum up, your success will depend on how thorough and correct your research is and how motivated you are to complete this pathway to get Canadian PR.
As for the risks, the worst case scenario, what does it look like? Well, you don't settle down in Canada, or you move back home, or you move somewhere else.
Oh, actually, I had a colleague at work who was in his 40s, and he came to Canada through a job offer, and he couldn't get Canadian PR, but he spent a few years in Canada simply working and living life and enjoying his life. And I honestly don't know whether he explored and exhausted all of the options to get his PR, but eventually he moved back to his home country after talking to his wife. But this experience in Canada helped him get a better job in his home country, so Canada was a nice stepping stone for him, and now he is happy and he is living his happy life back in home.
Well, that's it for questions for today. That was a lot. Thank you so much for sending these questions over, and thank you so much for watching. If you have more questions, you can always ask them in the comment section below or go to our Facebook community and let us know if you like this format. We try to do our best to help you answer questions, because for all the questions that people ask, there's always other people that have the same exact questions, so we feel like answering them in this way is beneficial for everyone. So let us know if we should do this type of format more often.
And a huge shout out to our Patreon supporters. Thank you guys, and if you would like to support our channel even more, you can join our channel's membership. And if this video was helpful, please click the like button below and subscribe to this channel to be the first one to know when we will be collecting more questions and answering them in another session like this. And we will see you in the next one. Take care.
Bye.